My name is Clara, and looking back, those early days of marriage felt like a dream, woven from the softest threads of normalcy and warmth. David and I had met 3 years earlier at a mutual friend's barbecue in our quiet suburban neighborhood outside Seattle. He was tall, with kind blue eyes and a laugh that crinkled the corners just right. The kind of man who remembered your coffee order, black with a hint of cinnamon, and surprised you with it on busy mornings. We married in a small ceremony under a canopy of autumn leaves, vows exchanged with the scent of damp earth and wood smoke in the air. His family home, a sprawling 2-story colonial with ivy climbing the brick facade, became our sanctuary after the wedding. Richard, David's father, lived there alone since his wife passed a decade earlier, and he insisted we move in to keep the old place alive. I hesitated at first. The house was his, after all, but David's pleading eyes and Richard's booming assurances of family sticking together won me over. Mornings in that house were rituals of comfort. I'd wake to the gentle patter of rain on the roof, a Pacific Northwest constant, and pad downstairs in my slippers to the kitchen where sunlight filtered through lace curtains, casting golden pools on the worn oak table. The air carried the rich aroma of brewing coffee from the old percolator Richard swore by, mingled with the buttery scent of toast popping from the chrome toaster. David would shuffle in next, hair tousled, planting a kiss on my temple before pouring his first cup. "Morning, beautiful," he'd murmur, his voice husky from sleep, and I'd smile, feeling anchored in this picture of domestic bliss. Richard joined us soon after, his footsteps heavy on the creaking stairs, newspaper tucked under his arm. He was a retired engineer, broad-shouldered with silver hair and a perpetual twinkle in his eye, the sort of father-in-law who told Dad jokes over breakfast and slipped me $20 bills for incidentals. "Clara, my girl, you're the light in this old barn," he'd say, clapping David on the back with pride. It felt genuine. The hugs, the stories of David's childhood scraped knees and fishing trips, the way he'd fuss over my plate, ensuring I had seconds of his famous scrambled eggs flecked with chives from the garden. Our life wasn't lavish, but it was secure, built on small joys. I worked remotely as a graphic designer for a local firm, my home office in the sunroom overlooking the backyard where azaleas bloomed in spring. David managed a hardware store downtown, coming home with tales of quirky customers and sawdust on his boots. We'd curl up on the living room sofa evenings, feet tangled under a knitted afghan, watching old movies while the grandfather clock ticked solemnly in the hall. Richard respected our space mostly, retreating to his study after dinner, a wood-paneled room lined with bookshelves sagging under engineering tomes and faded photos of family vacations. He'd pour himself a scotch, the ice clinking in crystal, and hum old tunes as he read. There were tiny frictions, of course. Richard's habit of rearranging my spices in the pantry for efficiency, or his offhand comments about my artsy career versus David's real work. But I brushed them off as generational quirks. "He means well," David would say, squeezing my hand. "He's just set in his ways." And I believed him, because in those moments with David's arm around me and the house wrapped in quiet harmony, what was there to doubt? My grandmother's death 6 months into our marriage added a layer of bittersweet security to our world. Gran had raised me after my parents' car accident when I was 10. Her modest bungalow in the suburbs, left to me in her will, was my anchor, a paid-off 3-bedroom with a wraparound porch and heirloom rose bushes I'd planted as a girl. The estate wasn't a fortune, but the house appraised at $450,000, enough to finally buy our own place or invest in my design business dreams. Gran's lawyer called on a crisp Tuesday, her voice crackling over the line as rain lashed the windows. "It's all yours, Clara. No liens. Clean title." I wept that night, not just for her, but for the future it promised. Independence, a nest egg for the family I hoped to start. David held me close, whispering, "We'll honor her with it." Richard, overhearing from the doorway, nodded solemnly. "Smart woman, your Gran. That house is gold, Clara. Take care of it." His words warmed me then, a paternal blessing on my windfall. The first uneasy ripples came subtly, like stones skipped across still water. It started with questions over dinner one evening. The table set with Richard's favorite blue willow plates, steam rising from a pot roast, fragrant with rosemary and garlic. "So, Clara, what are your plans for that bungalow?" Richard asked, fork pausing mid-air, his eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. I shrugged, savoring the tender beef, juice pooling on my plate. "Fix it up, maybe rent it out or sell when the market peaks. Gran wanted it to secure my future." He leaned back, chair groaning under his weight, and chuckled, a low rumble that didn't reach his eyes. "Future's now, girl. With real estate booming, you could flip it quick. David and I could help scout buyers." David nodded absently, focused on his potatoes, but something in Richard's tone lingered, insistent as the persistent drip of the kitchen faucet late at night. I mentioned it to David later in bed, sheets cool against my skin, the house settling with soft creaks. "He's just excited for you," David murmured, turning off the lamp, his breath warm on my neck. But sleep evaded me, the ceiling fan whirring overhead like whispered doubts. Then came the whispers, phone calls Richard took in his study, door cracked just enough for muffled tones to seep into the hall. I'd pass by on laundry runs, arms full of warm towels scented with lavender dryer sheets, catching fragments. "Yes, the deed's in her name. We'll need to move fast." Power of attorney, maybe. My stomach twisted once, but I chided myself. Eavesdropping paranoia, surely. Richard was helpful, even driving me to the bank to deposit Gran's insurance check, his old Ford rumbling along rainy streets, wipers slapping rhythmically. "Family protects family," he said, patting my knee paternally. David grew quieter those weeks, eyes darting away when I brought up the house, claiming long shifts at the store. Nights he'd roll away in bed, back a wall of tension, the space between us widening like a fault line. "Everything okay?" I'd ask, tracing his shoulder in the dark. "Just tired," he'd mumble, voice thick. I let it go, brewing his coffee stronger, folding his shirts with extra care, convincing myself the cracks were imagined, the air still thick with our shared history's comfort. The point of no return crashed in on a gray Saturday afternoon, 3 months after Gran's passing. David was at the store, Richard out running errands, leaving the house unusually still save for the distant hum of the refrigerator and the steady tick of the hall clock. I decided to tackle the study's clutter. Richard's endless papers spilling from desk to floor, offering to organize as a surprise. The room smelled of aged paper, leather polish, and faint cigar smoke, sunlight slanting through half-drawn blinds onto a mahogany desk scarred from years of use. My hands trembled slightly with dust motes dancing in the air as I sorted stacks. Old tax forms, yellowed blueprints, innocuous. Then, tucked behind a row of encyclopedias, my fingers brushed a manila folder, edges worn soft. Heart quickening inexplicably, I pulled it free, the paper whispering against wood. Inside lay the nightmare made tangible. The top sheet was a draft power of attorney form. My name boldly typed, signature line forged in what looked like my own looping script, witnessed by David's hand. Pages followed. Emails printed from Richard's account to a shady real estate attorney, plotting to, convince Clara to sign over the bungalow via emotional leverage. David plays the devoted son. My pulse roared in my ears, vision tunneling as the world slowed, each breath a labored rasp. Nausea surged, hot and acidic, knees buckling until I gripped the desk, knuckles whitening, the wood grain biting into palms, slick with sudden sweat. Below the email's bank transfer drafts, Grand's estate funds rerouted to an account in Richard's name, disguised as family loans. And the gut punch, a text chain screenshot between David and his father. "She'll cave, Dad. I'll handle it for us." The room spun, cold sweat beading on my forehead, legs jelly as reality fractured. My husband, my rock, complicit in this theft. Earth truly slipped from under me then, folder slipping to the carpet with a soft thud, my sob echoing in the stunned silence. I sat there on the study floor for what felt like hours. Though the clock showed only minutes had passed, my body curled around the folder like a wounded animal protecting its kill. The air grew thick, oppressive, laced with the musty tang of betrayal that no amount of polish could mask. Tears carved hot paths down my cheeks, splashing onto the papers, blurring ink just enough to make David scrawled, "Love you, Dad. Let's do this." Legible through the haze. How had I missed it? The averted eyes, the late nights, at work. Richard's probing questions now weaponized in black and white. Rage flickered at the edges of my shock, but mostly there was a hollow ache, as if my ribs had cracked open to expose the raw pulse of trust shredded. Finally, legs numb, I gathered the documents, hands still quivering, and slipped them into my tote bag, the zipper's rasp unnaturally loud. I needed David to explain, surely a misunderstanding, a prank gone wrong. But deep down, the forgery's precision whispered otherwise. David arrived home at dusk, the front door clicking shut with its familiar latch, keys jingling into the bowl. I waited in the kitchen, folder hidden on the counter behind a loaf of bread, heart hammering like a trapped bird. The scent of his cologne, sandalwood and citrus, wafted in first, once comforting, now cloying. "Hey, love, rough day at the store," he called, shrugging off his jacket, hanging it on the hook with habitual care. His eyes lit on me, smile faltering at my ashen face. "Clara? You okay?" I nodded stiffly, throat tight, gesturing to the table where I'd set out stew, carrots and beef simmering since noon, steam curling invitingly. "Sit, we need to talk." He obeyed, puzzled, spooning portions as rain pattered against the panes, the overhead light casting long shadows. Words stuck like thorns. Finally, I slid the folder across, voice barely above a whisper. "Explain this." His spoon clattered into the bowl, broth sloshing. Color drained from his face, eyes widening in genuine panic. Or was it? "Clara, It's not what—" I cut him off, voice stealing despite the tremor. "Your signature on my forged power of attorney, texts to your father about handling me for the house, my grandmother's house." Silence stretched, broken only by the stew's bubbles popping softly. He ran hands through his hair, gaze dropping to the tablecloth's faded florals. "Dad came to me months ago, said we were in debt, the store's loans, his retirement drying up. The bungalow could save us. He drafted it, said it was just a precaution, that you'd understand family first." Understand? The word ignited something feral. "Family? You forged my signature, planned to steal from me while kissing me goodnight." David's eyes pleaded, voice cracking. "I didn't sign off on the transfer, Clara. I told him no last week. Please, it's him, not me." But the texts lied. Dated yesterday. He reached for my hand. I yanked away, skin crawling. Richard lumbered in then, unannounced from the back door, coat dripping, eyes narrowing at the tension. "What's this?" he boomed, spotting the folder. No denial, just a sigh, heavy as the wet wool he shed. He pulled out a chair, sitting with deliberate calm, the wood groaning anew. "Clara, darling, let's discuss like adults. That house is too big for one woman. Sell it, split the proceeds. Fair for the family that's housed you." His tone dripped condescension, laced with false warmth, like syrup over poison. I shoved the power of attorney at him. "This isn't discussion, it's fraud." He scanned it, unfazed, folding it neatly. "Preemptive measure. David mentioned your hesitation. I wanted to help. We're blood. Your gran would have wanted unity." "Blood? He wasn't mine." David interjected weakly. "Dad, maybe later." But Richard steamrolled, leaning forward, breath minty from gum. "Think, girl, my pension's gone, widower struggles, David's store teeters. You, with your freelance checks, keep it? Selfish." The accusation hung, thick as the stew's aroma now turned sour in my nostrils. My hands fisted under the table, nails biting palms. "Get out of my documents, both of you." That night fractured us. David trailed me to our room, apologies tumbling like loose change. "He pressured me, Clara. I love you more." But his eyes dodged, feet shuffling on the carpet's plush weave. I locked the bathroom door, ran scalding water over my face, steam fogging the mirror until my reflection vanished. Sleep came in fits, dreams of Gran's roses wilting under Richard's boots, David's face morphing into a stranger's. Morning brought the first twist, rifling David's phone while he showered, water thundering behind the door. I found deleted emails, not just complicity, initiation. "Dad, the appraisal's $450,000. We split 60-40. I'll get her to sign during dinner next week." Sent by David. My blood iced, phone slipping from numb fingers. He wasn't coerced. He orchestrated using his father's greed as cover. Emerging towel-clad, he froze at my glare. "You started this for money." Denial crumbled into tears. "The store, debts piled, you earn steady. I thought sharing." Sharing? Theft by marriage vows? Escalation peaked that afternoon in the living room, fire crackling in the hearth despite the mild day, casting flickering shadows on family photos, smiling lies. Richard arrived with a lawyer, a weaselly man in pinstripes clutching a briefcase, the air sharpening with cologne and printer ink. "We've prepared a settlement," Richard announced, spreading papers on the coffee table's glass top, coasters pushed aside. "You sign the bungalow over. We pay you $100,000. Generous." The lawyer nodded obsequiously. "Legally sound, Mrs. Ellis. Your husband co-signs as marital property." Marital? Gran's gift predated vows. Fury boiled, cold now, precise. "It's mine alone. Forgery's a felony." Richard's laugh barked, false joviality cracking. "Prove it. David will testify family consent." David beside him stared at his shoes, mumbling, "Clara, let's not fight." Silence from him, deafening, damning. The room's warmth turned suffocating, logs popping like gunfire. Twist two, the lawyer slipped, mentioning prior transfers. $20,000 from Gran's account already siphoned post-death via a fake gift letter David penned. "For house repairs." Richard shrugged. Theft layered on theft. I stood, voice lethally quiet. You both disgust me. Out. They blustered. Threats of divorce, painting me ungrateful and hysterical. But I herded them to the door, locks clicking final. Alone, the house echoed hollow, clock-ticking judgment. The night after confronting David and Richard, I didn't sleep. I transformed. That cold fury solidified into a plan, sharp as Gran's carving knife I'd kept from her kitchen. I packed a suitcase at 3 a.m., the house silent save for the tick of the clock and my heartbeat, and drove to my best friend Lily's apartment downtown. The city lights blurred through my tears, rain streaking the windshield like liquid grief. Lily, a nurse with a razor wit, took one look at my hollow eyes and the folder, and her hug anchored me. "We're nailing those bastards," she swore, brewing strong tea that steamed with cinnamon, its warmth seeping into my chilled fingers. I recounted every detail, the forgery, the texts, the siphoned $20,000, while her jaw clenched. Twist 3. Lily revealed her ex-husband, a ruthless divorce attorney, owed her a favor. Marco's ruthless. He'll gut them legally. A glimmer of hope sparked. My knight in not-so-shiny armor. Marco, bald with a goatee and a sharp tongue, met us at his office Monday. Glass walls framing Seattle's skyline, the air crisp with coffee and ambition. I laid out the evidence, documents, screenshots, bank statements on his desk, heart pounding louder than the distant traffic. Fraud, theft, potential coercion. He's playing with fire, Marco mused, eyes narrowing at the forged power of attorney. Let's freeze the bungalow. File a police report for forgery and misuse of estate funds. We'll subpoena the bank. My fear warred with resolve. Confrontation loomed, but the thought of losing Gran's legacy was worse. I called Gran's lawyer, stammering through my discovery, who gasped, "Impossible theft. We'll handle it, Clara." Legal machinations began, paper trails tightening like a noose around Richard and David. David pursued me that week, showing up at Lily's door, pleading in the hallway lit by flickering fluorescents, the smell of takeout from neighbors mingling with tension. "Clara, I'm sorry, I panicked. Dad'll stop this." His eyes glistened, sincere yet weak, hands outstretched. I crossed my arms back against the doorframe, railing cold under my palm. "When? After you drain the house? I saw your texts initiating this." He crumpled. "Speaking of debts, the store's $80,000 loan, Richard's dwindling pension threatening foreclosure. I thought sharing would save us. I love you." Love? It tasted bitter now. I stepped closer, voice low, icy. "You chose greed over us. Out." He lingered, offering reconciliation, but I slammed the door, his footsteps fading like a ghost. That night, solitude soothed. Lily's couch, city lights painting patterns, the first quiet since the storm. The public showdown erupted at the police station, a sterile room echoing with distant phones, the air antiseptic and sharp. I arrived with Marco, David, and Richard, all summoned, the tension thick as a fog. Detective Reyes, mid-40s with a stern face, sat behind a desk, papers scattered. "Mrs. Ellis, your report's serious. Forgery, $20,000 unauthorized transfer." Richard scoffed, chair scraping, dismissing it as family dispute. "Clarification, officer. We're compensating for her poor financial sense." David beside him slumped, gaze on the peeling linoleum. "It's my signature, too," he mumbled. I placed the folder on the desk, hands steady now, no tremble. My signature forged, their texts plotting this. Records show the transfer. Marco slid in bank proofs, my voice cutting the air. Richard Ellis stole from my grandmother's estate via my husband's complicity. I'm pressing charges for fraud and theft." Richard's face paled, vein throbbing in his temple, eyes darting to David. "Son, defend me." David ducked his head, voice cracking. I'm in over my head." Silence. Deafening. Damning. The detective nodded, leaning forward gravely. "Mr. Ellis, you're under investigation. Mr. Ellis, stay for questioning." Richard erupted, shouting, "Family betrayal!" But officers moved in, the handcuffs' metallic clink finalizing his fall. David, pale as paper, followed in stunned submission. I exited, Marco at my side, Lily outside beaming, the cold air washing over me like a baptism of freedom. "I'm not afraid anymore," I whispered, lighter. Months later, I stand on the porch of Gran's bungalow, the Pacific breeze crisp with ocean salt, daffodils swaying in my mother's urn I planted last spring. The house, now renamed Gran's Rest, glows amber in the setting sun, my laptop open on the wicker table, designs humming with creativity, my own design studio thriving, funded by no man's greed. David's gone, vanished to a small town gig, our divorce finalized last month, the papers signed with a quiet nod, no tears left. He sent a letter once, begging forgiveness, blaming Richard's pressure, but I shredded it, my closure in unlinking vows. Richard, convicted of fraud and theft, sentenced to 3 years in prison after a brief trial, his reputation in tatters. The bank's freeze on the bungalow lifted, the $20,000 returned, Gran's legacy intact, my lawyer calling it a rare, clean win. The memory lingers, his rage at the station spitting, "You'll regret this, Clara." But the police escorted him out, victory sweeter than any imagined. Lily visits often, our laughter filling the porch, the smell of her baking cookies mingling with rose perfume. I'm stronger, wiser, my heart scarred yet healed, trusting myself above all. "Family's overrated," Lily jokes, sipping tea, but I smile. My found family's brighter. The story ends here, on this porch, the same as Gran's last, but now free, a phoenix risen from ashes. I've learned love shouldn't demand theft and strength lies in walking away. Goodbye, weak David. Goodbye, greedy Richard. My life's mine, unwritten.